Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing on this historic day here in Winston-Salem? We're delighted to have you here as we continue our really comprehensive program of recognizing and commemorating key places and people in our community. We'll be joined today, of course, Mayor Pro Tem Vivian Burke will speak in a moment. Councilmember Durham Montgomery, whose ward we're in right now, can't be here today. He does have a church duty he's got to be at. Do have John Larson, councilmember from the South Ward, and certainly an expert in the whole area of his historic restoration and commemoration. Today we are unveiling a marker just behind us here that will commemorate the Brothers Spring. As well as the African school that John tells me sat right about in there, I guess. So the spring itself played a key role in the history and workings of Salem. The Moravians pretty smart folks where they picked a place to go. There are good water supplies every way, one coming this way and one coming, I guess, from up Town Run Lane coming down that way. And then, of course, the African school, the first school for African American children after the Civil War. So we're so delighted that we're being able to continue this work of doing that, and I certainly congratulate and thank the members of our Historic Resources Commission for their hard work in doing that. It's now my pleasure to present to you our Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Vivian Burke, and also Councilmember of the Northeast Ward.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to stand here. I feel like I am at home. And I looked over at my friend Maurice Spitz Johnson. When I came to this great city, and I called it my city, I fell in love with it. I lived on Bargrave, not too far, and I was assigned to teach at Diggs Elementary School. Maurice was teaching at 14th Street School. I was staying in a house on Terrace and Maryland, I believe. And I didn't want to stay there because I would have to share a room with someone, and I was married, so when my husband would come home, he would have to have a place to stay also. So I called Maurice. I said, Maurice, would you come and move me to Bargrave? I said, because Maryland Cunningham lives downstairs, and she told me this lady had an extra room. And I want to tell you all about this extra room. Sometimes people don't know how people sacrifice and how hard they work. What did I get in that room was a bed, and when I walked, the door touched the bed, and when I went to the end, I had to do this like this to go by the dresser, and the bed was right up to the window. But it was a good place. They were very good people, and it was so many wonderful people in this city working with the parents and the children. So I felt like I was coming home. I used to come to Old Salem from Bargrave. I bought me a brand new car too that December because I got tired of riding with people. But every day I would go to Old Salem and I would buy me a cup of Peerless ice cream and some Krispy Kreme donuts. And Krispy Kreme told me they needed me to advertise for them because eating all those donuts every day. But it was just good. I hope you all feel what I feel about this area. I learned so much from the people in the area. I took time and I listened to them. And as I talk with you, some of the names are just going through my head. And I'm saying to all of us who believe that the history of this area is important, we thank you, we commend you, and may we continue to move forward to talk about the contributions that the people made in this area that enhance this whole city. God continue to bless all of you on this great historical day. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Let me ask Councilmember Larson, would you like to say a word here in you're back at the...
You never give the politician a chance to speak. Actually, my ward is one block that way, so I still feel like this is an important part, certainly an important part of the city. And what it tells me is that our history is incredibly deep, and we continue to explore and reveal it through time. And I would certainly bring accolades to Mo and Martha Hartley, who will speak later, who have spent a great deal of time discovering and recovering the Brothers Spring, and then also looking at the African American story and all of its complexity, particularly with education being as important it is at this particular location for the school. And these are things that have been lost, have been buried in time, as it were. And we're fortunate to have organizations like Old Salem that are willing then to dedicate the time and energy to renew our memories of these places. And I'm very grateful for the work by the Historic Resources Commission to then commemorate it in a positive way for everybody daily to go by and see. So it's a combination of efforts, and we're fortunate to have that team together. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, John. Thanks for being here. I did want to recognize our city manager, Lee Garrity, is here, as well as our planning director, Paul Norby, is here. And of course, Michelle McCullough is the chief staff person for the Historic Resources Commission. We thank you for all your work. It's now my honor to present to you Karen Mcmanus, who is a member, a commissioner on our Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission.
Good afternoon. I'm Tina Thacker, and it's okay. Kristen's name is printed on the program, but she had a family event that she had to attend. But I am a member of the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission, and on behalf of the commissioners, I would like to thank you for coming here today. The Historic Marker Program began over 10 years ago, and to date we have placed more than 40 markers throughout the city and county. Historic markers help us remember and learn about important places, events, and people in the community's collective history. They mark a spot in history that is worthy of remembrance. We will learn today about the Brothers Spring and the African School. Since the 18th century, the Brothers Spring served an important role in the Moravian community as a source of clean water, campsite, and recreational area. The Moravian community also played a role in assisting freedmen in the construction of a school near this site. We invite those of you who know more about this important site and its history to come up and share with us one at a time. But we will begin with Dr. Michael, aka Mo Hartley, the Director of Archaeology at Old Salem Museums and Gardens. Mr. Hartley?
It is a pleasure to be here today. And I've been thinking about the meaning of what we're doing today, and the meaning of this place that Martha and I became fascinated with and began to look for. A basic part of the story of how we found this place has to do with a flower. It's called the Forget-Me-Not. We ran into a record in the Moravian archives that said that Bishop Desfinitz, a famous botanist and collector, in 1821 recorded that there were forget-me-nots at the Brothers Spring. And we said, where's that? Well, we didn't know. And Floran Bynum, who was the leader in establishing the Old Salem Gardens, bemoaned the fact that there was this place called the Brothers Spring, and she did not know where it was. And then we knew from information about the location of the African school, as it was called, among other things, that the Brothers Spring was allocated to be part of that educational institution after the Civil War. That land that up here on Salem Hill, right here, was right over the Brother Spring, and the water source for that school was the Brother Spring. So we began to get some inkling about where it was. And then Adelaide Freese, the famous archivist, in a discussion that we read about, that she wrote in the 1920s about Salem, and she said there are forget-me-nots at the Brothers Spring just after you cross the bridge over Salem Creek. It's in the woods on the left. So we said, well, that's neat. Let's go there. And so we did, and there were 2 outflows, beautiful outflows, fresh, clean, clear water with rocked up walls on these 2 outflows. And we said, well, here it is. Here's the Brothers Spring. Well, there's a mystery about something that was lost and then comes back into your possession, in a sense. When you regain something that has been gone, and suddenly you say, there it is, here it is. That happens with objects that are meaningful to us. It also happens with place. And so right down that slope right there is a beautiful outflow of water, and it is the location of the Brother Spring, and that's what we remark on today. But what that Brother Spring has done for us is it has brought us into this historic community of Happy Hill and drawn us to remember the freedmen who put that school in place. Yes, the Brother Spring was a place of encampment. It was a place of military encampment during various wars. It was there was at one time in the 1840s a park down there. But now we look at that history that this place calls to our attention after the Civil War and says, pay attention to this. And what it says is, forget me not. Do not forget me.
Thank you, Doctor. It's very, very enlightening, and I love the story. I always remember forget-me-nots in the spring there. So, if we move along here, I want to call on Barbara Morris with the St. Philip's Moravian Church.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I use 2 words when I describe St. Philip's: grace and mercy. Because this past May 5th, 3 weeks ago, we celebrated 195 years. A lot of you do not know that it is a Black Moravian church in Winston-Salem. We are located on 3002 Bonnet Avenue, but the 5th Sunday in the month, we have morning worship services at Old Salem. Old Salem, St. Philip's is on tour, the Log Church and the Brick Church. And it was because of members from St. Philip's back in 1867. They thought that blacks needed, well, not the word black, thought colored needed education also. So they went around asking for donations in the community of Salem to start the Freedom Church. So it was the Freedom Church, the Freedom School, the Colored School, and the African American School. But it was because we wanted to show people that blacks could learn also. So it was in 1867, the fall of 1867, so the school was opened in December of 1867 here in the Happy Hill community. I did not live in Happy Hill Gardens. I lived where 40 and 52, I was in that area that was demolished, but I went to school with children from Happy Hill Gardens from 1952 to the class of 1964, And I knew them, and I wanted to live in Happy Hill Gardens because you didn't have to bring in wood and coal. So, but my grandmother said, no, the government wants to know too much of your business. But, so remember, St. Philip's is there, and a lot of people who went to Old Salem to visit years ago, St. Philip's was not on tour, but St. Philip's is located in Old Salem at the end of Church Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Now I'd like to call on the Right Reverend Dr. D. Wayne Burkett, who is a bishop with the Moravian Church. Right Reverend?
I decided after I saw who was on the program and knew that Dr. Hartley was on the program and Sister Morris was on the program, I decided not to talk too much about history because I didn't want to embarrass myself. So instead, I want to share a different kind of thought with you. The historic site which we mark today, the Brothers Spring, the African School, this site calls to mind for me, at least in a symbolic way, two related values of the early Moravians, and they're actually values still today. The spring, of course, known for its two sources of clear, cool water, suggests to me all that is essential to life. I mean, without water, life ceases to exist. Water has long been understood as a biblical image of the beginning of life and that which sustains life. And I might add that on a warm afternoon like today, that image of cool water sustaining life is pretty easy to grab hold of, you know. Quite literally, life itself springs from water, pun intended, y'all, and spiritual life hearkens to the waters of the Red Sea, through which the Hebrew people escaped to freedom, and later the waters of baptism. The African School, as I understand it, the first post-Civil War school for freedmen and one of the oldest in the state, reminds us that education creates the potential for an even more fulfilling and enjoyable life. A life of knowledge, reason, skill, and furthermore, this site emphasizes that access to education should be for all people, for individual personal fulfillment, and as a basis for a democratic system of governance. So for early Moravians, the values of spiritual life and education were at the core of their beliefs. The life of the Spirit, its nurture and enrichment, was central to the purpose of the Salem community. An educational opportunity for all people was considered essential even from the earliest days. So, while a natural spring and a school may seem unrelated except through geographical proximity, both of them point to important values for early Salem and important values for today: the enrichment of body and spirit and the enrichment of the human mind. Those values will always be important. And may this marker keep both of them in our minds and in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. It's very well said. Thank you. I love the connections. Very, very well put. Now I'd like to call on Cheryl Harry, who is the Director of the African American Programming at Old Salem Museums and Gardens.
Good afternoon, everyone. I work at St. Philip's, and I interpret the 18th, 19th, and 20th century history of African Americans in Winston-Salem, and it's an honor and a privilege to do that. As Barbara mentioned, St. Philip's has a really extraordinary history, and as we're interpreting daily, a lot of people want to know, well, what happened after slavery ended, or where did people live? So Happy Hill is an extension of that story in Old Salem, and that's what we're seeking to do. And we're very happy that we can connect the two communities. Because when we say Moravian, people just think white European. But I need us to begin to think Moravians were people of African descent too. So we need to think black and white when we say Moravians in Winston-Salem, because black and white Moravians helped build the city of Winston-Salem. We're very concerned about the history of the community here. To that end, we're working to preserve or rehab 2 shotgun houses that are in this community that we hope to bring right down here on Alder Street. And in those houses, we plan to have the history of Happy Hill, because we don't want to forget, we shall not forget, that history. And we'll be able to call the names of people. It won't just be the slaves, but it'll be Bodney and Phoebe and Wade Bidding. So you'll be able to see, and history will become very real. And not to stamp on the National Black Theater Festival, but this is the holy ground in Winston-Salem, okay? But after this, we'll be doing a tour through the community. We're going to go up to the Happy Hill Cemetery, and I hope Maurice is going to join us there. If not, I have information there. Also, we're going to go see the 2 shotgun houses now, and then we'll ride back through and actually look at the location. So, thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And we're going to be on a trolley for the tour, right?
Ebenezer Baptist
Church.
Church.
The van.
The van. We're
Okay.
actually going to have a van, y'all. We were going to do a walking tour, but, well, okay.
A little more. Right. Well, let me, as Tina alluded to, invite anyone who in the audience who might have some other recollections of the spring or the school that they would like to share. I invite you to come up now. Sure.
I am Frank Vignone. I am the new president of Old Salem. Today is really, I think, a compelling, important moment. I'm going to butcher this quote, but I think it's Thoreau who says that the rays of the sun will no longer be remembered when you remove the shutter. And for me, it's moments like this, and even if it's just a plaque, remembering provides the shutter through which we can see the sun's rays. And so I want to thank everyone, particularly Mo and Martha, and everyone else who's been very instrumental in keeping this message alive and the importance so that we can, those of us new to the area, can actually see the rays of the sun. So thank you. I'm just very proud to be a part of this in the audience. And then I'm also supposed to tell you that there is liquid refreshment back here for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, and welcome again to Winston-Salem. Glad to have you. Well, I think we're going, oh, sorry, yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the president of the Happy Hill Neighborhood Association, and we are so proud to welcome you to our community. We are grateful to Cheryl and to the Triad organization and the Old Salem for bringing our beautiful plants and for helping us to re-establish and bring back all of those wonderful memories of this Happy Hill Neighborhood Association. We hope you'll enjoy the tour, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Maurice?
Let me say just a few moments and give you just a little history. I am Maurice Spitz Johnson. I never lived here, but my father was born here, and he was born here because his father, Columbus Pitts, came from High Point and decided he wanted to settle here. On Liberia Street, which is now has a historic name about Africa. It was dedicated not too long ago to the doctor from Africa. But that's where my father was born, and I understand that my grandfather, Columbus Pitts, had a 2-room shack, and every time he had a child, they added 1 more room. They finally had 3 rooms added to that little shack. And there is a street named for Columbus Pitts. And Columbus and his wife and his wife's mother are buried in the cemetery, which is just up at the top of the Happy Hill. I have taken interest in that because of that history, and I'm trying to keep that cemetery clean. But Mother Nature says we're going to keep growing, and so it needs work all the time. There is information about the cemetery on the table, and there's a sheet that you may sign if you are interested. I'd also ask two things. If you think you have a person buried in that cemetery, let us know. If you think you're willing to work, we work on the second and fourth Saturday mornings from 9:30 to 11:30. We'd love to have you help us also. So that's my little note of history about the Happy Hill community.
Thank you, Ms. Green, and you're doing a wonderful job of restoring that cemetery, and thank you for the hard work. So, Michelle, I assume the program going to walk over there.